What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Fatal Garage. I'm Josh Thornell, and in today's episode, we're going to be installing the Tapout Fuel Cam into this gorgeous red ATS-V. First things first, within the engine bay, the fuel cam is down here with underneath the valve cover. To be able to get to that, we need to start taking off some of the top appearance pieces to be able to get access. So to do that, remove your oil filter or oil cap first. And then this is a T27 torque spit to take off this screw, which holds down the cover. Once that has been removed, go ahead and replace your oil cap, just so that way it protects it so nothing falls down into your valve cover. Alright guys, so if you haven't already, go back here and go ahead and disconnect your battery. The reason being is we will be doing some electrical disconnections up front, and so we're just going to go ahead and do that. And since we're also messing with fuel, you want to disconnect your negative right here from your battery terminal, from your battery, and then that should be it. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. Back up here in the engine bay, our next step is here. We're going to want to take off this entire vacuum assembly up top. So there is two electrical connectors, one here, just on the top, and then on the side there's one here you want to pull out, and then one on this side as well right there for that solenoid. So disconnect those electrical connectors. Next, you want to go over here and take a trim tool and disconnect this tree. I like to just fish it down here in the front, out of the way. The next up is, these are the vacuum, there's a vacuum line here and a vacuum line here that both go down to the turbo for your wastegate solenoids that are sitting right here. So what you want to do is, instead of reaching down here to get down to your wastegate to actually unplug it, is actually just slide these off of the nipples here, and then these lines can just stay in out of the way, and you don't have to worry about reaching your hands down there. So to get this vacuum line off, the first steps that I like to do is I like to take some pliers, grab that connector and just pull it back. That way you just have the spring connector just back here, just floating a little bit on the line. I'm gonna go ahead and do this to the other side. And now what I'm gonna use a little pick to just slide this line off. Now we have this line and the other line disconnected. Now there's these little retainer clips here that keep the line in place. I'm gonna go ahead and unclip those retainers. I like to just use my trim tool as well for this. You just push it in there and they just pop right up. Next up here, you're gonna wanna remove, there is 6 number 10 millimeters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next, on the driver and passenger side, you want to disconnect from your blow-off valve. This car actually has the Turbo Smart blow-off valves here on the ends. You want to remove the nipple from the blow-off valve on this side as well, which connects up to here. Lastly, check all of your lines here. Make sure you disconnect from your air intake and move this line out of the way. Next, pull up gently on this. You will notice that you have vacuum connection back here to your valve cover. Remove that. And vacuum connection here to your intercooler area. Remove that. And then this whole piece can slide out of the way. Next up for me is I'm actually going to remove most of the ZZP intake. The reason being is there is a bolt here that attaches for the oil pickup tube here, or for the dipstick tube, and it's just really hard to get to with the ZZP elbow because I've tried this before. So I'm going to remove this ZZP intake right now. Not necessarily needed if you have a Rennick intake. I'm able to do that bolt without removing the intake, so you might be able to skip this step, as well as I'm removing this because I'm also going to be doing some other pieces with the install here, so this will just make it a little bit easier. There's a number 11 here. You don't need to take them all the way off, you just need to loosen them up. Next up is to remove your MAF sensors. Gray tab and purple connector for the passenger side, and a red tab, black connector for the driver's side. So don't get those mixed up when you do put this back. it'd be fairly hard, but if you did, for instance, switch your maps for whatever reason, then you would have an issue. Next up here, I'm going to go ahead and remove this intake box, like so. Remove that intake tube, and remove that intake tube, and this whole ZZP intake essentially comes out. Sorry guys, I must have not hit record here. So I go ahead and I finished up that 13 millimeter to release the elbow off of here. I disconnected the PCV line, which is right here, and then there's an 8 millimeter that connects to the blow-off valve, bypass valve, whatever you want to call it here on these cars. There's an 8 millimeter here, so 13, 8 millimeter, and then the PCV line, and then that entire elbow from the ZZP intake should be able to come out. These next steps in the removal process aren't necessarily needed for the fuel cam itself. However, they are needed for the DSX Flex Fuel sensor and the Autotech high pressure fuel pump internals. So go ahead and go and do this next part here. So you're going to ignore if you're going to do just the fuel cam, or follow along if you're doing the other two installs as well. But what we're going to be doing is removing this entire trim piece for the cowl and for the wiper assembly. Remove all of that so we have easy access to behind the engine where the actual fuel pump and the fuel rail is. So that's going to be our next steps here. First step is to remove the wiper blades. I like to use a very thin, small flat blade screwdriver to remove these caps. So just remove these caps like so. Next up, you need a 15 millimeter to take off the wiper blade arms. Next, to remove the arms, you're going to want to press a little bit here where the joint is, and also kind of wiggle back and forth. Now that you have the windshield wipers off, now you have to remove these push pins. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 push pins, and then there's also a tree in the center, which you'll leave this tree in until the very last, and then it'll pull out when we go ahead and remove this. So I'm going to go ahead and start removing those 10 trim connectors, and we'll remove this whole plastic piece. Next, you want to come over here to this corner where we have this overlap here. So in the corner, so if you notice, it pushes in actually into the plastic of the cowl cover, and then also into the gasket here. So you need to lift up and pull out at the same, basically at the same time. Next, you need to go ahead and pull these away from there. There's also a pin here that slides in to the trim. So you also need to just pull kind of straight off, and that should slide right off. So here on the passenger side, there is the windshield wiper fluid bottle, and then there's the line that comes up here for the windshield wipers. You do need to disconnect this line. You need to squeeze together this little fitting and push, and then they should come apart like so. Next, you're going to want to start slowly pulling up. On the plastic, and what this will start to do is, you notice it starts to get it out of the trim panel, or the seam here for the windshield. So you need to go slowly across the seam, where I like to do at least, and work myself from one side to the other. And then all I'm going to do is slide it out an end. Now that we got our trim panel removed, there are 2 more push pin connectors here for this deflector. So go ahead and remove those. To remove those 2 clips, this kind of folds up and attaches here to this gutter trim piece, and then pulls out of the way. Moving to the passenger side, we need to remove this little cover here. There's one on the driver's side as well that you'll need to remove. There is a 10 millimeter that's down here, and a 10 millimeter there that both need to come off. After you remove those 2 bolts, this just slides up and away. Next, you want to come over here to the driver's side and you want to do the same thing. Next up, we're going to go ahead and remove the wiper blade assembly. So there is this push pin connector right here. You just push in on the tab on the bottom and then slide it out, and it just slides right out. And then there is a number 10 here and a number 10 over there that we have to undo. Once you remove those two bolts, what I found is the easiest way to do it is it sits into this grommet here on the wall. The easiest that I found to do it is just to push up a little bit, slide it over, rotate, and then pull the entire thing out. You can also pull it off the grommet if you really wanted to. I just choose to slide it off and it's a lot easier. Next, continuing along with the removal of the windshield wiper motor, we need to remove this harness from inside this wall. There's a grommet over here. It needs to pass through, disconnect it, and then push this to the side a little bit because this entire wall needs to come out. Once you get the clips unclipped from the firewall, you can easily go ahead, squeeze the grommet together, and then push it through. And then you can squeeze the entire piece through, and then I'm just gonna push it over here off to the side. A little bit of a life hack here. So obviously I removed the struts now from the hood, and what I'm gonna do is there's actually a little support here for a grommet at the front of the airbox. And so I remove the grommet, and what I actually do is I slide the foot of a ski pole with the basket still on it, the foot of the ski pole into that grommet hole, so now it can't slide around anywhere. And then I use this right up against the hood support, so can't go anywhere. Bump it, it's not moving. This isn't going anywhere. It's actually a pretty good support. So I like to use that when I'm working in these type of areas, just to get the hood propped up a little bit higher and completely out of the way. Next up here, we're removing this entire rain pan basically for the windshield wipers. We have to remove a lot of 10 millimeters here. So we have a 10 here, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. I believe that there are, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 number 10s here that need to come out. Now that I've gone ahead and removed all the nuts and bolts that hold on to this 10 mil. So there's two number 10s that everyone forgets to remove when they're doing this rain screen as well. And then they go ahead and they try to remove it and it doesn't. And so there's these two little support tie-ins right here that go to your strut tower. And they're 10 millimeters as well. Now that you have all the nuts and bolts removed, now you want to start prying this up. Now this will be glued down to the chassis the first time from factory, so this is the first time removing it. It will be glued down from the factory. So what you want to do is almost get a pry tool, such as like this one, and we're going to pry up a little bit here in the corners as we're moving it along to try and get some of this, or to try and ease it away from the chassis. Now this is all loose, you want to slide this area forward just a little bit here before you start picking up. So then lift up, slide out from underneath that, and then out of the way. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the charge pipe on the driver's side. Now I don't need to remove the charge pipe on the passenger side since I'm not gonna have to go over there. The fuel cam is only on the driver's side, so that charge pipe is gonna be able to stay. There's also a band clamp here that connects it to the snout from the turbo. So I'm going to disconnect that. These two bolts were 10mm up top. Next, I'm going to start disconnecting things from the top mount intercooler, starting with this wiring harness back here. There is a push adapter right here, a tree. So go ahead and remove that. And then there's a plug here. And then there's also another plug back here. You don't have to disconnect this yet, but I'm gonna do it already, just so I can get this whole harness out of the way. Now on your high pressure fuel pump area, there is a cover here, a metal protector. There is the two more trees that attach this harness to that. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove those and push this out of the way a little bit further. And again, moving that harness isn't 100% necessarily just for the fuel cam. But since I will be doing the high pressure fuel pump internals and the flex fuel, it makes sense to do it now anyways. Otherwise, you could just disconnect from back here and leave it connected to the metal shroud, and that'll be fine, and just push it back into the way, since you would have the hood cowl still there at that time. Remove this Christmas tree right here for this front harness. Just flip that down. Now I'm going to undo the number 10 bolts that hold down the top mount intercooler. They hold it around the outside, and then there'll be two longer bolts that go here in the center. So around the outside and then here in the center. All right, make sure you have all the bolts disconnected. There is a Christmas tree like push pin here that connects to this vacuum line. You'll need to undo that as well. And then this should be able to pop up, and we'll just flip it over here and set it here on the front cowl. Sorry, I forgot to hit record here for a second here. There are 3 number 10s that you need to take off for this high pressure fuel pump bracket area or shield, and then there's some foam here too. Just push that back. So there's 1, 2, and then there's also a number 10 here, which is a little bit tight. Make sure to use something with like a magnet socket on it or something for this screw or for this bolt. Next, we're going to remove this wiring harness right here, which connects to this. So disconnect this wiring harness. You also need to pry it off of this bracket here. That way it can go with the plenum, bottom part of the plenum here. There's also a number 10 right here that you want to take off. It's for this bracket which holds on this solenoid, not this solenoid. This is the only one that I like to actually put this bolt back into the location when I'm not using it, just as a little reminder that this is kind of flopping. If you want to remove, there's a push tab down here for this, so you want to get pushed down in there. There's a gray tab, and then pull up. And then this just moves out of the way here. And then similarly with this line, there is a tab here. You push this tab to the side. It's a little gray tab, and then you can pull this line off. There are 6 13s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4, 5, 6. Those are the next things to come out. Now that we have those 6 out, now we can remove this bottom part of the plenum. I'm gonna go find a good place to set this down. Focusing on the driver's side. So there's a 15mm that needs to come off down here for the oil dipstick. And then there's a couple 10s up here that need to come apart as well. Now I'm gonna unhook some of these harnesses right here. That way I can move some of these out of the way. I have this whole harness here. I'm gonna disconnect here for the air. I like to pull it just on the other side here of the oil fill and the dipstick. That seems like a good place to just kind of toss it out of the way. I'm going to remove this. There's a Christmas tree here to remove the rest of that bracket, just so that way it is out of the way as well. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and snap the harness away here from the valve cover. Next, I want to go ahead and disconnect the spark plugs. You pull back the white tab, you press down in the center, and you pull. I'm actually going to pull the chipstick for a second. Just to pull this harness onto the other side as well, so we can pull it back just a little bit further here. Go ahead and put the dipstick back in. And I like to use just really big, white, ugly zip ties to pull everything out of the way. I'm just going to wrap this whole side here around this support bar. Next, I'm going to take off the coil packs. When you set these out, wherever you put them, I like to keep them in order as well. That way they go back in the same order that they came out. All right, now it's time to take off the valve cover. You got to go ahead and do all the 10mm bolts that are all around it. The bolts will actually stay there. They don't come out all the way, which is very nice. So you just have to loosen them all up and then pull this thing off. All right, we got all the bolts disconnected. Make sure, go around, feel them, make sure they can lift up or down just within their slot. That's how you know if they're loose. And then go ahead and lift. Now we have the valve cover off. The first piece here is we want to actually remove this front bracket here to put on our ZZP Cam tool. And that'll lock our cams in place, and then we'll remove the remainder of these bolts here. So first, remove these first four. They're number 8, so go ahead and remove those. Next, you want to take your ZZP Cam tool, take these 2 pieces off of it, so they undo with an Allen wrench here. You'll see that there's a groove in that ZZP Cam tool. You want to line that groove with the groove that's on your sprocket here. So you'll see, so this side with the groove facing towards the back of the car needs to slide in. Now you want to place it basically kind of over top of it, and then rotate it around the sprocket so it lines up. Now you want to do the same with the other side. The groove again is towards the back of the vehicle. Place it on the sprocket here and then spin it around. Next, you want to take the center section of the ZZP Cam tool here, slide it here in the center. I'm actually going to display that one out just a tiny bit. Line that up here in the center. You want to reuse your stock bolts that you just took off. You want to reuse the center bolts to hold down the ZZP Cam tool. We want to tighten down these number 8s just a little bit. I just like to give them a little snug. Next, you want to slide the ends together and then slide in the Allen bolts. Tighten down the ZZP Cam tool pretty well. So now we want to go ahead and remove this 10mm down here. It doesn't need to remove the 10mm all the way, but you don't need to remove the sensor. This is your cam position sensor. You want to just unbolt this. Now you don't need to remove it necessarily. Actually, all I do is I twist it out of the way. And then I actually put my bolt back in just so that I remember exactly where that went. Next, you want to remove the 16 millimeter, which goes right here onto the sprocket itself and ties the cam into the sprocket. I want to go ahead and loosen up the rest of the 8 millimeters that hold down these bearings that go over top. We want to loosen those all up. And kind of do it slowly. You will see that there's spring tension underneath here from our valve springs. So as we lift this, as well as from your fuel pump, which has a spring in it as well. So as you undo these bolts, it's going to start to press off of it. So just be mindful of that as well. That way you don't lose anything or it's not unexpected. Now we got all the caps out. I have them setting over there on a table in the correct order with the bolts matched up. As a note here, there are on these caps a little kind of hump or indicator, as you would read it. They point towards the center. So the bottom caps have a little nub too, and they point towards the top. I'll remind you again once you go for the reinstall, but just to let you know. So finally comes time to let's go ahead and remove the cam. Now you want to pick this up a little bit in the back and then slowly kind of walk it out is what I like to do. As you can tell, it just lifted. There we go. Kind of just put my hand under it. Alright guys, as you can see, so this is the old ZZP fuel cam, and this is the new Tapout tuning fuel cam that's about to go in here. You can actually see a little bit of differences here on the fuel cam lobe itself. The ZZP almost has a concave to it as it comes back around, whereas the Tapout tuning does not. So as you can see, I have everything laid out here before it goes back into the car. So these bolts, these carriers will actually go back into the car. As you can see, here's the lobe I was talking about earlier. So this will place the center of that valve cover area. So that'll face the center, and then going forward, so front to back, this obviously goes in the front with the bolts going there. These are being used right now for the ZZP cam tool, so once I'm done with that, I'll put those back into here when we put this back on. So now I'm going to go back for a reassembly. I like to use engine assembly lube, the VP Racing. What I like to do is I like to use this, and then after about 500 miles or so, give or take a little bit, I like to do an oil change after that. So just to get kind of that out of the engine now. So, and put some fresh oil in. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Put the camera back over at the car, and let's go ahead and put the new Tapout tuning fuel cam in the car. All right, now it's time to go ahead and put the new cam back into the car for the first time. You'll notice here on the fuel cam that there is a notch. There is a notch that's also in the sprocket. You need to line that up. So take a note of where that's at first before you go ahead and put this into the car. It makes it a lot easier to line up. So I can kind of see where mine is right now. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up. Kind of shimmy it forward as best you can. Kind of like we shimmied it out. And then lay it down. Alright guys, so first going to come in here and tighten up this 16 millimeter in here. It actually goes to 2 passes. So this first pass, since we are using the ZZP Cam tool to hold this in place, the sprocket didn't go anywhere. I want to actually kind of suck in the cam itself. So what I'm doing is I'm using the first pass weight on here. So this is a 1/4 inch torque bit or torque drive. So this goes to 44 inch-pounds, so very, very light. And then we'll come back here and we will retorque it after we do these bolts to the 18 foot-pounds that it goes to finally. Now we tighten it up to the first weight of 44 inch-pounds. Now let's go to 18 foot-pounds. You can hear it. And now the rest of these go to 89 inch-pounds. So we're going to go ahead and tighten these all up into the 89 inch-pounds. Now they do go in a specific order. Now since we didn't loosen this side at all, we're going to go ahead and leave it the way it is. So it actually goes from, since we're going to just do this side, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll come up here. Once we get all that done, we'll put back on the front bracket and we'll go through that one. So let's go ahead and do that for now. Now we got to remove our ZZP Cam tool. Remember, there's 2 Allens on each side. Make sure not to drop any of these bolts or this Allen wrench down into your timing chain area. Now we got that out of the way. Let's remove these 8mm that go back into our stock piece. I don't know why I call everything OEM stock, but it is what it is. Rotate these around just like we put them on. Now we're going to go ahead and put on the front cap area. Now these also get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. Now they go from top outside to bottom outside to top inside to top or to bottom inside. Now that we got that all put in, let's go ahead and do one last cleaning around here. Make sure we have all good clean surfaces. And go ahead and check your valve cover the same. And let's go ahead and put the valve cover back on. Next, let's go ahead and reinstall our valve cover here. Seat there. Now let's go around with our 10mm here and get these all finger tight. Now that we go ahead and we have the valve cover on, we have all of our bolts kind of tightened down loosely. I'm gonna go ahead and torque them all up. I like to torque them all to 89 inch-pounds. Next up is that cam position sensor that we adjusted down here. Just remove that bolt that we put back in its original place for the time being. And then I like to just rotate it. I rotated it about 90 degrees, really just out of the way. So that way I could slide out that cam bolt. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and cut the zip ties that we had here in place to hold things together. Take this dipstick back out here for a second. I can slide all this back up and over. Perfect. Let's go ahead and put this harness back. This bracket attaches with the 2 number 10s that we took off here early on. Just tighten that up. Next, we want to reattach this bracket that comes down here, and it goes kind of through this, so it goes on the inside of this electrical cable here. It comes up here to the top, and then also connects onto your dipstick tube. So press that on. There we go. And then the electrical cable actually lines up with a tree here onto this bracket, so you can go ahead and I'm just going to put that tree in right now, and then I'm going to go ahead and line up the bolt. So now here we have this bolt here. It's number 10 as well. And then down here, remember, we have that number 15. Kind of a bigger lug. And this is also why we removed the intake from the driver's side as well, to be able to get to this lug. Go ahead and slide back in our dipstick here. We'll go ahead and put the coil packs back in. I like to put a lot of dielectric grease, kind of fill the boot before we slide that back in. Make sure it's all clean. and slide these out of the exact same place that you slid them out of. So I stored them over on a shelf in the correct order. Drop in our number 10s. This is a great time as well to change the spark plugs if you haven't in a while, or you're feeling a need to. Obviously this is the perfect time to do so. Now let's go ahead and reconnect our coil packs. The electrical connectors here. Push them on and slide the pin up. Now I'm going to go ahead and reconnect these electrical connectors here in the front. Push them down so they latch, and then make sure to also do the red locking tab on the 2 cam sensors. Make sure you hear that click. Next, I'm going to reattach this clip. And it's just basically 2 kind of tree clips that push down into this bracket. Slide this on. And again, this is that red safety clip. We just want to make sure that slides forward. Lock that into place. Next, I'm going to take this that I disconnected from down here and re-put that into the tree connector area, like so. And same with up top. So that basically covers it here for the actual fuel cam itself and that install. Next up, we're actually going to do the DSX Flex Fuel sensor and the high pressure fuel pump internals, and then you'll see the full reinstall of everything else. All right, so that's going to wrap up the installation here of the Tapout fuel cam. Next up, we are going to be doing the DSX Flex Fuel sensor as well as the Autotech high pressure fuel pump internals. After that, we'll be doing the reinstallation of everything else. So if you want to see that video, watch that next. That'll be posted here in a couple days. But that wraps up here with the fuel cam. If you did like this video, feel free to give us a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content just like that. And just like this, I'm out.